Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here with my post-Christmas book haul, and that means yes, I have books that I received from online friends as well as some books that I bought myself over the last few months and purposely did not share with you all. I'll get into that soon. As well, I got sent books from publishers, so these are all 2023 releases that are coming up. I haven't read them yet and I'm excited to share them with you all. So all that being said, let's get started. First, let's start with the gifts that I received for Christmas, and from my husband, I asked for Bluetooth headphones. If you follow my channel closely, you'll notice that I also asked for headphones for my birthday, and then a week after they arrived, I might have ran them over with the vacuum. So I had to ask for headphones again. This time I went wireless because I thought that it would be less likely to get tangled in the vacuum. So that was my gift from him. He knows that I prefer books, but because I do a lot of audiobooks, the ability to actually listen to audiobooks definitely makes headphones a really important thing to have. So that is my gift from him. I also bought myself some books, but unfortunately they're not going to be here in time for this book haul, so they'll probably show up in my spring book haul, so watch for that. But I did have two gifts that were sent from some online bookish friends who were very generous. I never expect anything from anyone, but there is something really enjoyable as a reader to actually get books at Christmas, so I really appreciate. These were great surprises and a lot of fun. The first one comes from a friend who I'll call Distant Earth, and he sent me the first three books in the Witcher series. So the book that I already own is The Last Wish. I have it somewhere. It's probably up here. Here it is. So I got the mass market paperback of The Last Wish from a used bookstore. I've read it a couple times and really enjoyed it, but I really wanted to go and actually finish out the series. So he sent me in this nice box set the first three books. I have to double check. I think there's like 6-7 books in the series. It's a little weird because of the short story collection. So the first one is Blood of Elves, which I've already read since I received them. And then at the time recording this, I'm working on The Time of Contempt. And then of course going on to Baptism of Fire. As I mentioned in previous videos, I'm really trying to work on reading the books on my TBR, or at least my physical TBR. So my intention is to have these read and then continue on with the later books if I can get a hold of them. But really enjoying these. I'm a huge fan of the video game. I don't play a lot of video games. I more watch my husband play this game, but I played maybe the first half and I kind of got stuck because I wasn't leveling up my character properly. But I really enjoy the video game, and I've really fallen in love with the Netflix TV show, which I know is like hugely controversial now because of the turnover of the main character, but I don't care. I love the franchise and I really have loved what I've read so far, so I'm excited to carry on with that. So thank you so much again for that. Again, never expected, but that was a huge treat to come in the mail. And from another online bookish friend, from Mike, I received two books in the mail from my Amazon wish list. The first one is a perfect surprise because that is The Last Wish by Peter S. Beagle. And if you're following my channel, you happen to know that I just read this book, but I actually had to read like a PDF copy from Scribd, which is pretty much the worst way to read a book. And I was reading it like on my cell phone. So I discovered that my library that used to have a copy of this book got rid of it, and now they only have the graphic novel. And so I was trying to read it as a PDF, which was a terrible experience, but it's a wonderful book. I love the book, love the movie. And so he actually happened to send this to me from my wish list before he even knew that I was reading the book. So that was like perfect timing and worked out great. And obviously at the time I had filmed that review, I hadn't received this book yet, or at least hadn't unwrapped it. So that's why I had to put a picture on the screen. But this is the lovely new edition. It's so gorgeous. It's like one of those nice fuzzy copies, and definitely this is a book that I will reread over and over again. Honestly, I'll probably read it again before the end of the year and then watch the movie because it's so good. Highly, highly recommend. Can I gush about this book enough? As well, he sent me another book from my list, and this one I haven't read, so again, it's going to be top priority. You'll probably see a review soon, and that is Sinners by Pat Cardigan. And this I know to be a cyberpunk book. I don't know a lot more about it, but I'm very interested in it for a few reasons. One, I'm still trying to find out which cyberpunk books work for me. It's a subgenre that I love the aesthetics of, but the books don't always land for me. But I really want to read more and try to find my niche in the genre. And also, I fully admit that I need to find more female authors in the genre that I absolutely love. Those of you that watched my best of the year list some people did mention that those lists are really heavy on the men, and while I will always be honest about what ends up being my favorites, I do try to read at least 50-50, and obviously I hope that my favorites are going to end up being 50-50. I have a particular love for a certain edge of like hard science that I find it easier to find men writing in that subgenre. So I'm hoping to find a new favorite female author, and hopefully this is that. And I'm really excited to check it out. Also, I'm used to classics and masterwork editions being super tiny books. This one is actually super chunky, but again, it's a top priority, so likely you'll see this in a future wrap up very soon. Next up is books I bought myself, or at least books I purchased using store credit. There is a used bookstore in a nearby city that I go to every, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, and I have store credit there, so when I go in I get to pick things out, which is always fun because it doesn't cost me money. And so I have some books that I've actually been buying over the past year, but for reasons I didn't want to put them into my December book haul, and that's the fact that pretty much what I do is I try to read a book first, and then when I fall in love with it, when I know it's going to be a favorite, I like to buy it. However, in December, I happen to be putting out all of my best of the year content, and so I thought it would be really repetitive to be talking about some of these books in one week or in one video, and then in the next video or the video after that, immediately showing them again. So that's why I held off, to kind of keep some surprise for the end of the year. So one of the books I got was Cryptonomicon by Neil Stephenson, and this I think is a no-brainer to buy because again, it's so chunky and thick, and while I have read it, I've actually read it twice, and I very much want to read it again. It's the kind of book that you want to have a good proper copy of. The first time I read it, it was on an e-reader through like Hoopla, and it just was not the way I like to do my ebooks. It's like you click on the page and it takes like a minute to load. It was very frustrating. So when I saw they had a copy there, I grabbed it and definitely found it to be much more enjoyable to reread this way. And of course, while I was there, I saw that they also had a copy of Anathem by Neil Stephenson, which is possibly one of my favorite books by him. I should perhaps do a ranking video of all of his books, but I need to read them all first. So that's something I could do in the future. Let me know if you're interested in that. But I love this one. Obviously, it was like top of my list for backlist books, and just like this book discussing philosophy, and it's just so unique and so geeky, and I loved it so much. And again, super chunky. Those are definitely the books I like to own because I want them available when I want to reread them, and I don't want to feel rushed to have to return them to the library in that like 3-week hold period, which is sometimes not enough. And another book I bought that might surprise you is The Speed of Dark by Elizabeth Moon, and this of course was a book I featured in my backlist favorites. And I might be surprising a few of you because I told you how terrible this ending is and how the book is just ruined by that ending. But despite that, I love everything else before then, so I did want a copy. It's again a book I could see myself rereading. I wanted to highlight different quotes and passages the first time I read it, which obviously you can't do when it's a library book. So this time around I can do that, and again, if I want to, I can just stop before the ending and leave myself in a happy place. But I was excited to get a copy of this because honestly I will reread it, just not the whole thing. And I think you've seen this book cover a few times on my channel, but yes, I did buy a copy of American Psycho because I love Patrick Bateman so much. Originally, I read this through my library. I loved it so much that I got a physical book through the used bookstore, and then the audiobook went on sale through audible.ca, so I actually also bought the audio. Does anyone else do that when you have a favorite you want in all the formats, somehow just in case? It seems like a waste of money. Usually I'm much more practical, but when it comes to favorites, I can't resist. I have in every format now, and I'm very happy about that. So highly recommend this book if you can handle it. It's messed up, it's not for everyone, but it's definitely for me. And I also bought a YA horror, and that was The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kristen White, which was a book that absolutely surprised me. A retelling of Frankenstein, gothic romance, but toxic romance. It is just everything I wanted in a book that I didn't know that I wanted. I really enjoyed this one, and again, the cover is like this pink, cute edition that is so deceptive, and it definitely was one that I was happy to pick up, so excited for that. And a few more books here that didn't make my favorites list, but I saw it at a used bookstore for a good price, so I did get a copy of Spin by Robert Charles Wilson. I read this before. I liked it. I didn't love it as much as other people. I often see this as some people's like all-time favorite science fiction book. So I am curious to reread this one and see if it warms up and becomes a favorite on reread, but I'm glad to have a copy. I also got a copy of Saturn Run by John Sanford and Katine, and this is a story or a sci-fi thriller following a future or near future where they discover that something is headed towards Saturn. And so both the US and China rush to make spaceships to go and investigate, and the story goes from there. This one is just everything I want. It has great humor, great adventure, hard science. There's lots of concepts surrounding physics that are explained within this book and discussed in the ending. And yeah, I'm really excited to have a physical copy of this one. It was like $1 at my used bookstore. I have no idea why they were selling it so cheap. And I feel like I might have showed this before, so forgive me, but I also got this awesome copy of Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin, and I'm really excited for this one. It's this vintage edition. When I found it at the used bookstore, they're like, oh, sorry, it's just an old edition. And I'm like, no, this is amazing. It was $4. And again, I had store credit to cover it, and it has like these blue pages. I don't know, I think it's really cool. I rarely buy retro vintage books, but this one was really fun, and I can definitely see the appeal of getting into that. And last, from my used bookstore, I got a copy of The Lady of the Lake, which is a witchery novel. So these are the same edition that go along with the trilogy that was sent to me for Christmas. And so this is book 5, so technically I still need to get book 4, and I'm pretty sure there's at least a book 6 that comes after. I have to double check. So I'm still trying to collect the last few, but I'm almost there. This is a series that part of the reason I want to buy is the fact that my husband is also a huge fan of this series, and I'm hoping that one day we will read them together. He's started reading the short story collection, so I definitely think there's hope, and hopefully when season 3 comes out, then that will kind of give him the nudge to go back to here. So happy to have them ready to go, so he has no excuse not to pick them up. Now let's talk about review copies, starting with the horror and thriller books. The first one is The Hollows by Daniel Church. This is a book from Angry Robots that I've already reviewed. Basically, it is a horror book that is set in a cold climate where there is a small town, there's a blizzard coming in, there is a body that is found. It definitely hits on a lot of the classic tropes of survival winter horror, which is something I like. So if you like that too, you may want to check this one out. You can check out my full review for more details. Next up is one that is still my regret for the end of the year list, and that is A History of Fear by Lucas Dumas, which is a book that I read after filming that list, but it definitely could have been a contender because in the story it's set in Scotland following a fictional man who was told to kill these people based off of the devil talking to him. And so the story is told almost in an investigative format, or a journalist who is chronicling what happened. And this book really pulls from real life cases where people believe that they're getting spoken to by the devil. Absolutely fascinating, gets really twisted, really psychological, and it's a slower burn, but it's so worth it. So I do recommend this one. Next up is A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. This is a Tor Nightfire title that's coming out in March. I'm excited for this one because I've read a few of the author's work, and while they aren't necessarily 5-star reads for me, I find that they do really fun things. Their books almost have a bit of a satire or humor to them and are a little bit goofier. And so I'm excited to see what she does with this. Haunted houses aren't normally my thing, but again, when an author is kind of taking that trope and spinning it on its head, it tends to work better. She's done really good things in this subgenre before, so I'm eager to see what this one will hold. And coming out in February, we have Sister Maiden Monster by Lucy A. Snyder. This is a story of 3 different women who are pulled together in this collapsing world and have to work together through this semi-apocalyptic event. I don't know a lot about it. The cover is darn gorgeous, and I'm really excited to check it out. Again, I'm always looking for those new horror favorites, so hopefully this is one of them. Now let's talk about some science fiction review titles. The first one being World Running Down by Al Hess, and this story follows a salvager in the future wastelands of Utah, and he is looking to go to Salt Lake City, which is supposedly a utopia where there is ability to get hormonal therapy and surgery so he can transition. And so this, I believe, is an Own Voices trans story that is set in a semi-near post-apocalyptic setting. It just sounds really interesting, blending together a lot of different genres, and I've seen some really interesting work done in terms of trans fiction these days, and so I'm always hoping to find a new queer favorite, and like I said, hopefully this one will work well for me. Also from Angry Robot Books is Moth by Jane Hennigan, and this one I think is coming out in March. The last one was February, and in this story it is set in a world where there has been this toxic virus that has come through, and these mutated moths have infected different men. Some of them were killed and other ones became crazed killers, and the story goes from there. This is one I just have to try out. I have no idea how I'm going to react to it. It's the kind of book that could be a favorite or could be a miss for me, but I am excited to try something different. I always say that Angry Robot Books takes a lot of chances and just doesn't do always the classic tropes of the genres, which I would prefer. Even if some of them are misses, I would rather them take chances than write the same boring story over again or publish the same stories over again. So looking forward to this one. The cover is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm certainly hoping it's going to be a favorite. I only select and accept ones that I think have a good chance of becoming one. Next up is Wild Massive by Scott O'Moore. This is a Tor.com title that is coming out very soon this spring, and this is set in a world where there's this building, this skyscraper that allows people to jump to different multiverses. It just sounds really kooky. The synopsis is a lot to take in, and the book itself is quite long, which is good because if you're going to have a chunky, crazy plot, you kind of need time for it to unfold. And so I'm very hopeful about this one. I've never read the author before, so I don't know what to expect. I think he does kind of goofy stuff, but we'll see. So review to come soon on this. And next we have The Mimicking of Known Successes by Malka Older. This is a Tor.com novella that she put out, or is putting out soon, that is supposedly set on this outpost of humanity, this colony on Jupiter, and it sounds like it's supposed to be this Holmesian style mystery, and I'm very eager to check this one out. It was one of my anticipated releases, and I really think that this one could hit the mark for me because I love when science fiction crosses over with mysteries. Next up is The Scourge Between Stars by Ness Brown, and this I believe is sci-fi horror, so it definitely crosses between the genres. I'll have to decide what video to put it into depending on which way it leans. This is a novella in length, and it follows a captain who is bringing their ship home. Their ship has been heavily damaged, and as they're coming home, it seems like something is within the ship or attacking them, and slowly people are being picked off. So it definitely has more of like a sci-fi horror premise to it. Sci-fi horror is something that everyone wants to read, but it's so hard to pull off well. So I'm hopeful for this book. I don't know what to think, so I will read it and get back to you all, but I definitely want it to be a favorite. It sounds amazing. Next up is another sci-fi novella, and that is Feed Them Silence by Lee Mandello. This is a short book that involves a scientist that works with wolves. He has some kind of neurological interface he creates to allow him to communicate with the wolves, and the story goes from there. Again, it's very short, and I've wanted to read this author's backlist for a while, Summer Sun, and so I'm not sure if I'll get to that one before this one, but yeah, I really am excited for this one. Again, it just sounds so unique and so different that it has so much possibility to be a favorite. I do get tired of the same tropey stories, and this one just sounds totally different, and I'm really hopeful that it's going to be like a smart intellectual read that'll be right up my alley. Speaking of books I'm hopeful for, I also want to read Red Team Blues by Cory Doctorow. This is a book from Tor Books, and I've never read from this author before, but I'm excited to finally change that because I feel like he's the kind of author that writes the kind of science fiction that I tend to love. And so this one follows an older protagonist, which already is a really nice change, who has a very successful career in Silicon Valley. And then the story, I understand, involves cryptocurrency, global financial shenanigans, and secret wars that underlie the modern world. So it just sounds really good. It's kind of a sci-fi thriller type mashup, but I'm just, yeah, hoping it's going to be a favorite. It sounds right up my alley, so I'm very, very hopeful for this. Do not let me down. And finally, switching over to fantasy, I want to talk about Under Tethered Sky by Fonda Lee. This is a fantasy novella by, of course, Fonda Lee, who is the author who wrote the Greenbone Saga trilogy, which I absolutely love. And so while this is completely unrelated, I'm very eager to see what she will do here. This follows a woman whose family has been torn apart when a manticore kills her mother and baby brother, and so she ends up teaming up with other monster hunters to take them down. Again, even though I expect it to be vastly different than Jade City, I am very much here for it. I would like to think that Fonda Lee could be a favorite new author, but in order to do that, I don't really like to call an author a favorite until I've read multiple book series or books by them. And so I'm eager to see what I think of this one. And yeah, trying to keep my expectations under control because I'm really excited to get into this one. It should be coming out within the next few months. And next is Where It Rains in Color by Denise Crittenden. This is a sci fantasy book, so I guess I technically could have included it in my last section, but I'm putting it here because while it's technically science fiction because it's set on another planet, it reads a lot more like fantasy. This one is just beautiful. It exactly looks like in the book what you're seeing on the cover. The world building is just lush, and that's very much the setup for this world, and it's all about color and beauty, and of course things get turned on their head and the story goes from there. It's definitely a debut novel, an ambitious debut novel, And the success of how I'm going to feel about this original book is really going to be dependent on what happens if it gets turned into a larger series, because it was a really good start, but it needs to have more world building development. So again, if you want to hear my longer thoughts, I did review it, I believe, back in December. And now let's talk about some orbit titles, starting with Ithaca by Claire North, which is the story of Ithaca when she stays home while Odysseus is away and what happens there. This is the start of this retelling series, which is not normally my thing, but I found this one to be very beautiful, very lyrical, and very feminist, and was just, yeah, really a delight. I believe it's going to be turned into a larger series, so I have to decide if I want to continue on with the books, but this one, even as a standalone, I found to be very satisfying. And next, I've received copies of the 3 books in the Rooks and Ruin trilogy. So the first book is The Obsidian Tower, then we have The Quicksilver Court, and finally, the last book that just came out, I believe in December, was The Ivory Tome, all by Melissa Caruso. And I've already reviewed this one. Essentially, it follows a girl who has the ability to touch people, but when she does so, it drains her energy, so she should not do that. And the story, of course, goes from there. There's a cute animal companion, and I did enjoy it quite a bit. And if you're interested in reading more by the author who wrote The Witcher, I've received copies of The Tower of Fools. Next is The Warrior of God, and finally, Light Perpetual. And while these are fantasy stories, I will say that they're much more heavy on the historical elements of the story. There's very little magic within them, and it just, again, reads much more like an alternative history with a character who is very distinct but very different than Geralt. So I would say if you like historical fantasy, check these out. If you're looking for another Witcher book, these ones might not deliver the same thing you're expecting, but it was definitely exciting to get to check out more by this author's work. And finally, I got a chance to read the historical fiction, all by Leo Carew. So the first one is The Wolf, the second one is The Spider, and the third one, which just came out again, I think in December, was The Cuckoo. And these are all Viking inspired. These are super dense historical fantasy that are, again, very light on the fantasy elements and very heavy on the history. And I'll admit, these are really dense to get through. These are not the kind of fantasy I pick up a lot, and I'm a fast reader, but I definitely had to take my time with them. But I can definitely see an audience for them. The prose were beautiful, the characters were well developed and intricate. There's a lot going on in this series, and I do see why people love it. It just definitely takes patience and time, which aren't always my thing. But yeah, these ones are definitely well done, just not entirely to my taste. So that's it for this video here. I'd love to hear of the books I talked about. Which ones would you like me to read and review and prioritize in the next coming weeks? And I'd also love to hear, what did you get for Christmas? Did you get books? Or even if you got something else, let me know. If you're new to my channel, I do read a lot of these genres, so horror, thriller, science fiction, fantasy, and sometimes true crime, but I don't seem to buy a lot of those or get them for review. And if you want to help me out with this video, you can give me a thumbs up, you can share this video around online, you can drop a comment, even if it's just emoji like a stack of books. And if you want to help me out more, you can hit that little notification bell. That way you never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.